So we're going to do our first AP style review. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what AP style is. So AP means Associated Press. Associated Press is a national wire service. Actually, Associated Press reporters work all over the world. But decades ago, communicators in the Associated Press decided to standardize some of the definitions they all used, so there would be consistency in all of the writing. And so one story written in Bangladesh is going to look the same as a story written in Grand Isle, Louisiana. And so Associated Press style guide is used by communicators in advertising, public relations, journalists, magazine writers, even broadcast writers who have to write for the web are going to have to know Associated Press style. So this is crucial for your role as a communicator to know this. So the good news is you don't have to learn the whole book. We went through and created a style guide, which you find on your website, that's going to give you some of the definitions that we feel like are important and are common in your career. And so you don't have to look these up if you learn it, but you should always have your book beside you. Nobody knows all of this unless this person has no social life, which is what I tell my students. And so I hope you have a social life, which means you're going to have this book beside you. Now, what we'll do for this lesson is look at abbreviations through courtesy titles. Now, abbreviations is really not difficult. It's a long entry in the book, but I've condensed it down here for you. But I do recommend that you look at the entries in the book because the definitions are good, but the examples are even better. So in most cases, you're going to spell out names on the first reference and then use abbreviations on the second reference. So look what I have here. The chapter of the Baton Rouge Bowling League will meet Tuesday. The BRBL will host a tournament in 2023. Now, really important to notice here, after I wrote Baton Rouge Bowling League, I did not put the abbreviation in parentheses at all. So don't do that. You just use it in the second and subsequent references. Some abbreviations are so easily recognizable that we can use them the first time. In fact, I recommend that, and the book does too, because it's easier for your audience. CIA, FBI, NASA, CBS, GOP, US, UK, UN, we know exactly what those mean. Now, notice how different these look. So if I have an abbreviation of 2 letters, I'm going to use periods. But if I have an abbreviation of 3 or more letters, then I won't use periods. One thing you want to be careful of is what I call vegetable soup. So sometimes an abbreviation is not clear. Maybe it's an organization we're not familiar with, or there's a reason why you sense that this wouldn't help the audience. In that case, go ahead and just give the name of the organization on second reference. Also, if I'm talking about multiple organizations, then I might have to use some abbreviations, maybe spell out some of the organizations to avoid the vegetable soup of my story. Now, academic degrees are also not hard either. So you always want to pick the most audience-friendly way to say an academic degree. So bachelor's degree in math, master's degree in English, doctorate in music. That's your simplest way, and that's the way AP Style recommends that you do it. Now I wanted you to notice the apostrophe in bachelor's and master's. That's important, and you have to do that. Also, I lowercased the degrees that were already not proper nouns. I did capitalize English because it's a proper noun. Use the title doctor on first reference for a medical doctor, but if a person is an academic with an academic degree, then we're going to go ahead and use that appropriate title. So you would want to look that up or check with the person to know what the title is. So instead of saying Dr. Janet Stevens, I'm going to say Associate Professor Janet Stevens. Now, sometimes people have multiple degrees. Smith has 2 master's degrees. The word degrees is plural, but master's stays the same. I think I have 2 of these slides, Carrie, so you'll have to get rid of this one. Sorry about that. Now, addresses are important because stories have a where element. And in a story, in print, and in the web, we're going to do something a little bit different that you might not do in broadcast writing. So we're going to be specific here, but you always use figures when you talk about a specific address. 123 Cucumber Court. Sometimes you abbreviate just a few things with a specific address. So these are all that you have to know. Street, avenue, and boulevard with a specific address. And then also compass points. You want to abbreviate those. So when I say a specific address, I'm talking about if you give me the address, I can knock on that door and I know exactly where I'm going. That's a specific address. When I don't use that, I'm going to spell everything out. I live on North Sesame Street. Now, if I'm going to list streets, the parade will go down Main, 1st, and 2nd Streets. Then if I have more than one, I'm going to lowercase that common noun element. And I'm going to spell out a compass point if I'm not talking about a specific address. The store opened on South Apple Lane. I'm going to spell out 1st through 9th and use 10th and above, use figures when I talk about streets. And in fact, this particular numbers rule is consistent no matter what we're talking about. It's going to come up a little bit later again with another definition. Franklin lives at 987 1st Avenue. Smith works on 456 North 10th Street. Now, it's good to know the difference between admit and acknowledge, too. So admit might suggest wrongdoing. People admit to crimes. But you want to say a person acknowledges that he or she is a recovering addict, or there's another problem with that person. That's an acknowledgement. It's not a crime to have a drug problem. It's an acknowledgement. Honestly, you can say the person said he or she is struggling in this area. Said is a great verb. It's my favorite one when you're talking about something somebody's telling you because it's neutral. It doesn't tell me anything about that person at all. It is your safe verb. So keep that in your back pocket and use it often. Now for ages, we're always going to use figures. And ages are common in writing too, just because we describe people. And we describe things with ages too. So when ages are modifiers, we're going to use hyphens. The 7-year-old boy was lost. We want to use hyphens for compound nouns. Only 7-year-olds may compete. Now this is not a new definition. In fact, when we talked about hyphens, we went over this. So this is a review for you. When ages are expressed in plurals, we aren't going to use any apostrophes. Blake is in his 30s. Now, note the way we state ages in print and web. This is really important, and this is sometimes a hard habit to develop. And that's because it's the way we consume news and information on this platform. So when we read it, our brains can totally get what's happening here. Eli 10 has a sister 6. Now we would never, this is not conversational, this is not how we do it in broadcast. In fact, in broadcast writing, we put the ages before the name. But that's really hard to read. So this is what we're going to do when we write for the print and write for the reporters do. Now, allege is not one of those words that you want to use often. You don't want to suggest that you're making an allegation. In other words, let somebody else tell you. You can quote that person. Use alleged bribe or similar phrase to make it clear the action is not treated as a fact. So maybe someone is suspected of doing something, and we don't know for sure, then we don't want to use it. Okay, so you want to avoid redundancy. This is probably the biggest problem with this word. The district attorney accused her of allegedly taking the bribe. So we don't need all of that here, right? We can say the district attorney accused her of taking the bribe, or the district attorney alleged she took the bribe, or the district attorney said she took the bribe. Again, here's my verb that I like, the word said, and that'll work in this case. Now, I often see these words interchanged. So, and you'll notice this too now that after we go over this, you'll understand. So these all mean different people and different numbers of people. So alumni is when you're talking about everybody. This is plural. It's a group of men and women. So LSU alumni attended the game. Or alumni can mean a group of men. The fraternity alumni pledged to mentor new students. So alumni is going to be the word you're going to use most often, because often you're talking about a group of people, men and women. So you use the word alumni. Alumna is one woman. So McKinnis is an alumna of the Manship School of Mass Communication. When I see this, I know I'm talking about one woman. Alumnus is one man. The dean is also an alumnus of We Love Mike University, where he earned his PhD. So know the difference between alumni and alumna and alumna and alumnus. You can't throw those around. They all mean something different. Alum is not a word. I had to put this in. In fact, I took this picture of this Coke bottle. This is, oh my goodness, an offender word. I see it everywhere. But it's not a word, so don't use it anywhere. Pick the right one. Now, time elements and time are important because of the when element in your story. Okay? And in fact, AM and PM is one entry in the book. Time is another entry. Time element is another entry. We group these together because they go together. So notice how this looks. A period, M period, or P period, M period. Lowercase and use periods. And don't be redundant. 10 a.m. this morning. I only need 10 a.m. because that's what this morning means, a.m. Here's another offender, last Tuesday or next Tuesday. In fact, drop the last and drop the next. The verb is going to tell me whether this is Tuesday past or Tuesday future. The group met Tuesday. That tells me it was the Tuesday that just passed. The group will meet Tuesday. That tells me it's the Tuesday coming up. And so we don't need the zeros when we show the hour, 10 a.m., 9 p.m. In print, in web writing, we're going to use days of the week. So not today, tomorrow, or yesterday, tomorrow afternoon, this morning, only because there's a lag in time between the time that we write the story and the time the reader sees the story. And so it's not clear what we're talking about time element wise. Now in broadcast writing, you are going to use today, yesterday, and tomorrow because broadcast is a conversation that the reporter or the anchor is having with the audience, and we all understand what time means then. So be careful here and use days of the week. Use words for noon and midnight because that's really most easy to understand. And so most news stories are timely, so the day of the week is going to be enough. The date and the year are usually not necessary in the story unless it occurs at a time that's not clear or outside of the week we're talking about, or even outside of the year that we're talking about. Now, amendments to the Constitution are easy. Always spell out 1st through 9th. We went over that briefly just a few slides ago, and use figures for 10th and above. And so this is, again, a numbers rule. I love it because it's consistent. It doesn't change. So that's good news for us, right? Capitalize the word amendment. Communicators depend on the First Amendment. We studied the 14th Amendment. Now, if I'm going to list amendments, then I'm going to lowercase that word amendment in a list like that. So that is a capitalization rule we'll go over in a few minutes. Now, these are not the same words, and we can't interchange those either. So, bad is an adjective. It describes a noun, a person, place, or thing. That was a bad hamburger. Don't eat it. That mechanic did a bad repair job on our car. Now, badly is an adverb. That means it describes how somebody does something. Alabama performed badly in its game against LSU. The children behaved badly at the opera. So know the difference here. Practice it in your spare time. That's a way to own what you learn. Now, capital versus capital mean something different. So I hope this picture helps you too. The word capital describes a building, and you capitalize that word, and it has an O. His office is on the 3rd floor of the Louisiana Capitol. I wanted to show you something. So most state capitals have an O-shaped dome. So that's going to help you to remember that the building has an O in it, just like this building in the picture here. Now, if you're from Louisiana, we kind of are the exception there. We don't have an O-shaped dome. We have a tall capitol, but it doesn't look like that. But if you've been to Washington, D.C., or you're from another state, then you'll recognize that dome-shaped building. The word capital with an A, lowercase, describes a city. Baton Rouge is the state capital of Louisiana. The word capital, the same word, little c with an A, can also describe money or property used in business. So those of you who might want to write about business projects, you'll see that word quite often. Now, the goal here is to capitalize as few words as we need to. In fact, most words we overcapitalize. When in doubt, capitalize. Well, we're not going to follow that rule. In fact, we'll know what we're going to do. So avoid unnecessary capitalization and only capitalize proper nouns. Now, this is a title entry that we're going to go over later, but you want to capitalize formal titles before a name. Club President Andy Mayberry spoke at the convention. So I capitalized president. It could be president of the United States, president of the neighborhood lemonade stand. Still capitalize it. But notice I have no commas separating that title from the name. Just straight up write the sentence. We're going to lowercase the common noun elements if we list things. So we did this a little bit when we talked about addresses. So First and Main Streets, Lakes, Erie, and Ontario. So whenever you list streets, whenever you list anything that has a common noun element to it, you're going to lowercase that common noun. Please don't capitalize anything that's not a specific person, place, or thing. So in other words, I'm studying journalism. So let's make that a lowercase j. And only if we said the name of an organization, you would lowercase, I'm studying mass communication, I'm studying advertising, or political communication, all of that's going to be lowercase unless it's part of a name, a specific name. Now, I wanted you to show this picture because I wanted to help you to remember that kids are baby goats, right? And children are baby people. So when we write about small people, we're going to call them children. Unless it's a direct quote and somebody says the word kids, we're not going to change that. We'll keep it the way it is. But anyway, that's easy to remember. You don't even really have to study that one. Now, citizen, resident, native, national, and subject. These are all different ways of describing where people live, where they're from. The most common reference is resident when you want to identify where somebody lives. McFeeney is a resident of Grand Isle. So, for example, if the mayor said that all people who live in Baton Rouge need to water their lawns, you would want to say residents because that would include everybody here. The word native is common when you want to show where a person calls home. And this is a great word to use in feature writing when you get to go into a little bit more detail about people and where they're from. This gives us some information about their background. Summers, a native of New Orleans, studies biology at LSU. Citizen is only going to be used when we talk about refer to somebody who has full rights of a nation. So if the story is about citizenship, maybe it would be that. But you wouldn't say the mayor said all citizens should water their lawns, because that would exclude people who weren't citizens of the United States. And also, you cannot be a citizen of Baton Rouge, a citizen of Thibodeau, a citizen of Paris, or any place else. You're going to be a citizen of a country, not a city. U.S. citizens should exercise their voting privileges during the next election. So that's a case where you would use that word. Now, the word subject, I don't think I've ever used it in my career, but you never know, especially because we have such a global community now and we write about so many things outside of our own country. So a subject belongs to a nation that has a king, a queen, or another sovereign. Leslie is a subject of Great Britain. So you want to make sure that you understand governments and how things work, and that'll make sure that you use the right word there. So a national is a person who lives away from the nation where he or she is a citizen. And in a place, a big city or a place like LSU, we have people who are citizens of other countries who are in America as our guests. So my friend Stanley is a Nigerian national. That tells you what his citizenship is, where he originates, what he calls home. Now, the word claim we're just not even going to use, right? So here's my friend said. It's a better verb. When I use the word claim, what I'm really saying to you as a writer, I'm a writer saying, I really don't think I believe what this person said. She claimed to have seen the suspect. I'm saying to you, I don't know. So don't do that. That's not our job anyway. Just say said. So claim is one of those words you can toss in the trash because we're not going to use it. Now, composition titles are titles of works people create. There is a long entry here, and I think it's really filled with examples. I think it's worth your while to look through those and look at those examples. So a composition could be a song, a poem, a play, a book, a TV show, a computer game, a movie, a short story, a newspaper article, a magazine article. All of those are composition titles. Now, AP style doesn't allow italics or underlines. So if you see that on a quiz, that's not even going to be an option for you. That's going to be wrong. Your decision for something like this is, am I going to use quotation marks or not? Now, I am using italics to help you differentiate between terms and maybe make things clearer, or use underlines sometimes. However, that's not an option for AP style in our writing. So use quotation marks for composition titles. The Star-Spangled Banner is a song. Tom Sawyer is a book. The Avengers Endgame is a movie. Wheel of Fortune is a TV show. So all of those have quotation marks around it. Now, there's some things that you don't put quotation marks around. And honestly, I think learning this list is a little bit easier. Learn this list, and if it's not one of these, then you will put quotation marks around it. So don't do anything with the titles of newspapers and magazines. Don't put quotation marks around those. Don't put quotation marks around the word the Bible. Even though it's a book, we're not going to do that either. Reference works. Don't put quotation marks around Webster's Dictionary. That's a reference work. There are lots of those. The AP style book is actually a reference work. It's a book, but we're not going to do anything with that. Now, we will put quotation marks around a newspaper article or a magazine article, but not the name of a newspaper. So if I said the Reveille, the LSU newspaper, the Reveille, I would not put quotation marks around that. But if I were referring to an article somebody wrote, I would put quotation marks around that article. Now, courtesy titles we're only going to use those in direct quotes. So a courtesy title is Mr., Mrs., Miss, Ms. There was a time not too long ago where newspapers and magazines did use courtesy titles. And I'm kind of glad we moved away from it because that required us to make sure that we understood everybody's marital status. So that was a little bit hard to do, I think. And so I think it's better and more fair that we don't do that now. However, for example, you'll see courtesy titles in the New York Times because the New York Times uses a different style guide, doesn't use AP Style Book, and we do have some other publications like that. But for our purposes, we're not going to use courtesy titles. So again, use first and last names on first reference. Joanna Artigo is the group's new president. And then use last name on second reference. Artigo takes office in September. If you're quoting someone directly and that person uses a courtesy title, then you are going to use it in the quote. But otherwise, we're going to leave that out. And this is it. You've made it through AP Style Review number 1. So congratulate yourself.